I really had a lot of shame at such a young age. And I think if I looked at the root of all the anxiety and the meltdowns and everything, it was just shame around like, my parents don't know what to do with me. I'm broken. I am stupid. The school system we went to, pushed kids and still pushes kids to excellence. And I think in some ways that's good and that's fine. But in other ways, when you feel like all this pressure at such a young age to be excellent, because if I am not excellent, what's the alternative?
Welcome to a very special edition of Counselor Off the Clock. I'm Lydia Thompson, the host and a licensed counselor. We are starting a series called At Home. Today, I am at home with my friend Alyssa, who's telling their story of resilience. This episode that we planned on having and the episode that we actually have are very different, and I would say even better. While telling their story, they were brought back into their past, and we were able to get to a deeper place of vulnerability. You are going to hear a lot of love on this episode. We all deserve to have our story told, even if it's not done yet. If you like this kind of episode, let us know. I hope you can get comfortable because we are off the clock. Now, I have known Alyssa since, you were like in 8th grade?
Like 14? 13?
13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
I'm a couple years older, but we were in theater / speech and debate together. And you're one of my only friends that has seen me through that life.
So many transitions I have seen you through.
I mean, when I think about the person I was in high school, cringe. It is so cringe.
I have secondhand embarrassment of my own self. I agree. I'm such a different person.
Yeah, I'm everybody who knew me in high school, I'm so sorry.
No, you don't. It's like everybody who knew me and thinks they know me now. No, you don't.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't know me. So I'm thrilled to have you here. Oh, well, I was going to say, this new series, I love talking to experts in the field. I love talking to other counselors. But what I really love on top of that is hearing people's stories. And so when I threw this idea out to Alyssa, they were like, hell yeah, I will tell my story. So we are now here in your house.
Yes.
And we are at your literal home.
We are at my literal home, and my literal childhood home, actually.
Oh my gosh.
I know, because I live with my parents. I'm doing great in life. I am.
It kind of sounded like you were being sarcastic, but you are doing great in your life.
Yeah, it's kind of meta because it's both. I mean, I'm glad that I'm here. I think it is a huge part of the story I'll share today. Well, not a huge part, but a part about it. And
yeah, definitely.
Just the last few years have been, healing my inner child in my childhood home.
Wow. I hear a book coming along.
Boom, boom.
Well, we were talking about where to start, and to be transparent, we actually already filmed some of this morning, and then my phone died and I didn't know.
And that was already our second take, because
I wasn't going to tell them that.
Well, I spilled the beans on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's getting better every time.
Not that really we want to make this perfect. It's just been not great.
We've just had tech issues.
We've just had technical issues. And so I'm thankful for you that you have been patient. And I think it's helping me embrace my humanity here.
Yeah.
As we have even a different conversation. That podcast we recorded is gone. That conversation is gone. And now we are here having the conversation we're going to have now. And I think that's the beautiful thing, because your story can be told many different ways.
It can.
So we're going to strap in, be present. When we were talking about where to start your story, I was asking about the first time you went to therapy. Can you tell me about that experience?
Yes. So I was around 9 years old. I think I was in fourth grade. And my parents were downstairs. And my dad usually would be like gone for work by the time I was coming downstairs to go to school. But my dad was still there. And my dad and mom were like where I would pick up my things to like get in the car and go. And they were like, so we're going to pick you up early from school today. And you're going to go to this therapist and this psychiatrist. And I kind of knew what that was. And I just had so many mixed feelings.
Yeah. Did you know like what a therapist and a psychiatrist was?
I mean, I knew to the extent that like I knew my parents were asking me to go to this place because I had been struggling with my mental health, and that I had been having what I now know are meltdowns, especially around my homework. So, I mean, I knew it was because I knew what it was for, but I didn't know what they did necessarily in those sessions.
Got it. So what was your interpretation of being told you're going to go to a therapist for the first time?
For me, I think the story I started telling myself all the way back then was there's something broken inside me that other people can see through and see that's broken, and I'm too much for my parents, and they don't know what to do with me.
Which is like, it sounds like kind of the truth. Like from knowing you,
Yeah.
it was too much for them. They didn't know what to do with you.
And that's okay.
They love you.
And it's totally okay. I'm glad they sought help, right? Like there's a whole other alternative where they didn't seek help, and that wouldn't have been good either. But I still think it was just so difficult to be at that age going to therapy and psychiatry appointments and getting pulled out of school. And it felt like this secret double life that I was living that was so unrelatable to other kids my age.
Yeah, so you were like one of the only people who you knew going to
The
therapy?
only person I knew.
The only person.
The first friends that I had that started like having other mental health issues and I knew about it didn't happen until like later in high school, and then more in college. And then now it's very normalized. Now almost all my friends have a therapist, right? But back then it was just not the vibe. It was not what was being talked about.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so you like had this interpretation like, I'm broken, I'm bad. Other people can see how terrible I am.
Yeah.
Now we're heading into the season of life I knew you in. How did that affect who you were as an adolescent?
Yeah. So I went to therapy. I went to psychiatry, had anxiety, generalized depression. And then towards like the end of middle school, high school, when we really started, you and I started becoming closer to friends, it morphed into an eating disorder. And that also coincided with the first theater show I ever performed in.
Oh my gosh. What theater show was it?
Oh, Jesus. It was a bunch of white people in white suburbia doing Mulan Jr.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was great.
Who were you in Mulan Jr.?
I was the matchmaker, and this is some tea. So we have my sweet husband sitting over there making sure our tech doesn't mess up again. And we actually met doing that show.
Oh my gosh.
And he was Shang, and I was the matchmaker. And so Mulan, step aside. I got him for myself.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like we've known each other for a long time, but your husband has known you for like even longer.
He's the only other person from middle school, high school that I keep in contact with.
You really keep in contact with him.
I really keep in contact with him.
It's a lot of contact.
A lot of. Hi, babe. And he and you have both known me through just all these phases we're about to talk through, which is kind of cool to have you both in the room at the same time.
I know,
Yeah.
because we both love you so much.
Why?
And
Kidding.
Alyssa, answer the question. Why do I love you so much?
Because I'm a goober?
Yes. And
I don't know. You have to answer that yourself. Sorry, that was such a loud response.
You squeaked.
Okay, I squeaked because I'm on testosterone and I'm going through boy puberty.
Oh my god.
Which is a whole other part of the story. But
I love you because you're a goober. I love you because you're strong. I love you because you're open and loving.
Resilient.
You're resilient. You are. And I love that I have gotten to see so many phases of Alyssa. I didn't mean to turn this into a pile love on you either.
I didn't either, but
I'm here for it.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, so this is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on here to tell your story, because I think it's a really powerful one. So looking back, they didn't know what was going on.
Mm-mm.
And so how did that affect how you thought about yourself?
I really had a lot of shame at such a young age. And I think if I looked at the root of all the anxiety and the meltdowns and everything, it was just shame around my parents don't know what to do with me. I'm broken. I am stupid. The school system we went to, pushed kids and still pushes kids to excellence. And I think in some ways that's good and that's fine. But in other ways, when you feel all this pressure at such a young age to be excellent, because if I am not excellent, what's the alternative? I'm not going to be able to provide for myself. My life is going to have no meaning. What am I going to do? I wanted to prove, and I think that kind of became my story, is proving myself. And so I started using this shame that I had, and I was like, if I've got all this shame, I didn't consciously do this, but
right, you're 9 years old and you're like, I'm full of shame and I must.
Yeah, no, but my 28-year-old self is able to look back at that 9-year-old self and go, okay, so after you kind of went to the therapist, the psychiatrist, you got into theater, all these things, that kind of became my outlet for, okay, I'm going to push myself for excellence, and I'm going to use this internal shame narrative to motivate myself and drive myself forward. And that really, it looked like, for people that are not watching this, I'm arching my hand upward, but it looked like I was on this upward trajectory of life because I was, going places. But internally, I was on this downward projection of life.
Yeah.
Just shooting right towards burnout.
Yeah. I mean, so it's when you had all this shame and you're being identified as a problem, it's almost like as kids, we're trying to, number one, figure out how to be loved. And secondly, figuring out who we are in the world. Yeah. And so the first question of how do I get love was informed by you're a problem. You're a problem, but you're too much.
Yeah.
And then secondly, who am I to the world? Okay, my label is problem.
Yeah.
Too much. And then you tried to find a new label.
Yeah.
My new label is
I am the theater kid. And
overachiever.
I'm a goober.
And a goober.
And I need to make everybody laugh and feel entertainment from me. And I also need to impress people and win all these trophies in speech and debate. And
I'm going to work really, really hard so that I can get love.
Right.
And that I'm something other than not enough.
Yeah. And maybe, just maybe, all these trophies will hide the broken parts of me that I feel are unknowable. Because that's the other thing is in therapy and in this journey, it wasn't until I was 25, 26 that I really actually got the diagnoses that and the treatment, both through therapy, the practitioners that I work with now, the medicine that I'm on now, the quote unquote broken parts, obviously it's not broken, didn't even get solved until so much later in the story.
Right. So there's this disconnect. I also want to make sure that so I am taking some liberties to elaborate on certain parts of the story. And if I get them wrong, you just tell me.
I will. Thank you.
But I know that I'm helping elaborate.
Yeah.
So, because I love you.
I love you too. I'm glad because in one of our earlier takes, we were talking about how I'm different now because I'm working on not being so controlling.
Yeah.
So I think even this podcast episode is a great example of something that would have been difficult for me to do back in the day. Like I would have been so focused on how can I look good and how can I not look broken, and now I'm like actually letting someone else take the reins.
Whoa.
Big steps forward.
Thank you for trusting me with helping you tell your story. Yeah, so you received diagnoses later in life that helped inform what was actually going on. Can you talk about the diagnoses that you have now? Can you talk about them?
Yeah. So I'll separate them into two parts. One, the ones that are me. So I am autistic. I am ADHD. I have CPTSD. I have OCD. So some of those things are
all the letters.
I have all the letters. I am an alphabet soup. And so some of those, right, like you'll hear a lot on like the internet or whatever, like, no, a person with autism. No, I am autistic. I can't separate that part of me from myself. And so that's what like distinguishes between a diagnosis that is like neurodevelopmental versus one that is you get just in your lifetime. So yeah, those are the diagnoses.
Yeah. And you made a distinction. There are things that you feel comfortable saying, like, this is who I am, and it's the lens that I see the world.
It is. And actually, there's a label as well called autigender, which people usually don't know a lot about, that if you are autistic, you're far more likely to identify as trans than, the population who's neurotypical or allistic. And so the way that I experience my gender, I can't separate from the way I experience my brain and the way that I view the world as an autistic person and experience the world as an autistic person is the same lens in which I experience gender as well. So I am trans, there's an umbrella for that. I'm non-binary, but I also am autigender if I want to get real niche.
Yeah.
And I love language. I'm a writer, so using language to identify self is really, really helpful to conceptualize these questions that as a child we're looking for. And sometimes it just takes, like in my story later in life, to really understand.
Yeah. So how does this lens that now you see yourself, how does that inform how you see your childhood self and your adolescent self?
I just have so much more compassion looking back on that self. And sadness and grief, right? But I also want to celebrate like who I was as a kid before all this stuff like kind of started. I feel like I didn't have as full of a childhood as other kids. Like I would say around 9, like is when I felt like my childhood ended, when I went to therapy and I was having all these meltdowns. Like that's kind of when I look back and I'm like, my childhood kind of started changing rapidly from there.
Sorry. Yeah, so there's compassion.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the journey from shame to compassion?
Yeah. So back to the proving myself thing.
Yeah.
So the vein of life in which I keep saying in which, I'm annoying myself with saying that. That's also why I'm getting in my head. I'm like, you're talking weird. No.
I literally say absolutely
So much and you annoy
600 times. Yep.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
So I really I used the shame to motivate myself, to prove myself. It was a long journey. I think that's why it's hard to know like where to start even answering that question. I think it started changing around the pandemic when I moved in with my parents. And pretty much my worst fears happened. And I felt so seen through. I couldn't control this, what I now know as a mask, anymore. I had burnt out. When I came home during the pandemic, we weren't planning on staying here or moving here. Life just kind of happened that way. I was wrapping up grad school, which I would say is kind of like the last thing that happened in my life, where I was like pursuing this excellence hardcore and pushing myself and using shame to motivate myself. And I was like, I'm going to stick it to all these people that were so mean to me, and they're just
I'm going to
prove them wrong. Like, and I graduated early, and I was like the youngest person ever graduate from this program, and I got full ride, and like I was like, yes. And then the pandemic happens, and the world shuts down, and this career in theater that I pursued, right? Theaters were closed. What was I going to do to prove that this degree wasn't a waste of time and energy and money and all that stuff? So I ended up getting a job at my old high school as a theater teacher. And here's the thing. Looking back now, I don't have that cringe, that like shame that I did when it happened. Yeah. But when it happened, I was spiraling out. I was trying to hold it together. My life was changing so quickly. And I could feel my ability to control this mass that I have it together slipping. And so it got to the weekend before I was supposed to start teaching. And I had 4 meltdowns in a day. So very similar. I was in my childhood home too. So very similar to this time period of my life when I'm 9 years old, having meltdowns around school. I'm doing this now, though. At the time I was 25 and feeling this pressure of like, I want to go back to be the teacher that I needed. And I'm also wanting to still be that kid and prove myself. And both that's happening at the same time. Oh my gosh. And I just felt the world crashing down. And I remember calling you. You were the person I called. And I was like, Lydia, I am not well. I need support. And I had my family here, but there was something in me that was like, you knew that version of me back then. And I called you, and you were like, Alyssa, what are you going to do? And I was like, I think I have to go into the hospital. And this was my 3rd time in my entire life going to the hospital for psychiatric reasons. And in the hospital, I had to make this decision. Everybody around me was like, you can still keep the job if you want. They weren't trying to force me to quit that job. But halfway through my stay there, I realized I was like, I can't continue on the way that I'm doing. I can't do this job and get better.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I know that your life seems to have come to a complete halt.
It feels like it. And it's been 4 years of that. And every single year has been a new layer, a new diagnosis, a new treatment, a new medicine. And I'm glad we're filming this for the 3rd time, truly, because the first time we filmed this, I was so depressy. You looked at me afterwards. You were like, Liz, that was really good. And that was really serious. And I was like,
yeah, it was.
Dang, you can see through. You can see my depression coming through. I can't hide it. And even now, like, I'm sitting here and I'm glad I'm telling my story. But I'm also still that self that we're talking about at 9 years old is still there going, can people see through me? Am I doing a good enough job? Am I controlling too much, or am I not controlling too much? Am I balancing it all?
And now that we know, like, you're autistic, it also makes sense that, am I reading the situation correctly? Am I doing well enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like having a self that wants to come through all the time. And then this performance part of myself trying to manage those 2 parts, and it like which part comes out more depends on that anxiety that I have in my head.
So the pandemic happened, your life seemed to come to a halt, and then you kind of started over
completely,
in a way.
Yeah.
Is that where you want to go next with your story?
I think so.
Yeah. Tell me about rebuilding.
So the rebuilding, so it had I thought that I would be able to get back on my feet, get a job in 4 more months. Just give me 4 months to be not okay. And I'll come out of the hospital.
I'll be even better.
New version, new era.
I'll reinvent
myself again.
To be even better.
Yeah. And
wow.
I kept extending my stay. And here we are 4 years later. And even at the end of this last year, this will be a little spiralic how I tell it, but I'm just going to trust that it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
But even this, at the end of this last year, I was like, I'm done spending all my time, energy, resources on getting better. I'm done. I'm going to start living my life. I have figured out enough about myself. I have gotten enough coping skills and support system and all that stuff. I can just live my life now. And then I found out this last diagnosis that I had, which is OCD, and went through this huge depression that lasted like 3 months, and it was the worst it's ever been. And so I think that's also just a part of the story that I'm embracing, is that healing is not linear. It is spiralic, and it's kind of been this great clearing out of all this stuff that's just been that shame that has just been in the underbelly since 9 years old, has just been coming out to be lifted.
Yeah, I think the thing with shame is like, you have to, if you want to continue to live your life in a healthy way, like you have to continue to look at it, and it never fully disappears.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
I think the thing that started making me feel hopeful about, because I mean, I really did think like, oh, I'm never going to be well. I am never going to be a well human. Like, that's the story that I started telling myself.
I will be broken. I am broken.
That I am broken story, like, has kind of like ingrained itself in me even further, because I kept going to all these different therapists. Like, I have literally gone to 8 therapists in my lifetime.
Wow.
And it took till this last one to really feel like, wow, there is hope. And there is someday where, yes, I'm still going to have some of these diagnoses. They're still going to stick around. But I can actually like let go of this proving myself thing. I really do think I can work on that. And it took finding a therapist who is also trans and autistic to like really understand who I am.
Yeah. Now, like, we know that people can be understood by all sorts of people.
For sure.
But for you, it helped to have somebody looking at you going, you're normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're normal.
I think the way a lot of my anxiety got treated for a long time was through ways that for me was just unhelpful. It was it almost felt like gaslighting of like, oh, you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to do this. That's silly. And it's like, no, but for me, like, some of this stuff is actual, like, valid concerns and valid things that I'm struggling with, and trying to convince me that it's not a worthy thing to be anxious about. That's not the approach that's going to work for my brain.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't work for many people to just say like, don't worry about it. And people, like, with anxiety,
and like specifically with the OCD part. So a lot of people use exposure therapy or just like, and that's not gonna work for me. Like, there's just different ways to approach it, to treat it. And I'm so glad that I know all of these parts about myself now, because I think it has taken that awareness and then finding people who know how to treat that. Also finding someone that knows how to talk to me as a trans person. Like, I feel like I'm actually able to settle and be myself out in the real world, because I'm able to find that sense of security in my therapy sessions.
Yeah. You said something just a second ago, like, I know myself. I know it now. I know it all. Are you open that you might not know it all yet?
Absolutely. Because every single time that I've been like, I know it all, there's nothing else that's ever going to change ever again.
I know it.
It's going to happen. But no, I know enough of myself is maybe the way to say it.
Got it.
Where it's like, all these things I was trying to be, I'm no longer trying to be anymore. I've let off a lot of these facades. And really it goes back to changing, like, getting clear on what my values are. That has been so helpful in my journey. Because a lot of the anxieties I have with my OCD, I have this fear of forgetting. And so I didn't know this for the longest time, but I have this compulsion to note take everything, because I am like truly afraid of forgetting.
Yeah.
And to really, damn it, I'm losing my train of thought, dude.
Okay, let's take a pause. So we are jumping back in after taking a little break. We also have a feature by Hamilton.
Hi, buddy.
Hammy.
Are you trying to be famous?
Yes.
Yes.
If you are
Does
not
Daddy need to let you outside of the room?
watching, we do have a dog that is here. More than a dog. I'm so sorry, Hamilton.
He's like, I just need a place to sit.
Mm-hmm.
Will you sit, buddy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to acknowledge that we took a break.
Yeah.
Anything you would like to say about taking a break?
Yeah, I wanted to acknowledge that we took the break because in the break, I was having kind of like a mini meltdown, not like a full blown one. And one of the things that Lydia said when I was having that like meltdown was, this makes sense why this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because the very thing that we're talking about on the podcast is the very thing you're going through right now. Like the whole time that I was talking, this voice in my head was just getting louder and louder and louder, and which is why we took a break. I'm glad we did.
Same.
Because it quieted my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But this inner like critic that just was getting louder and louder and louder, criticizing everything I was saying, censoring everything that I was saying, got too loud. And I needed to have like a little pause to really validate that and go, this is one of the things in my journey that I had to learn is you don't have to push through.
Yeah.
And that is actually not what's healthy for me, to push through. When that gets too loud, I need to listen to it. I need to validate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that will quiet. Then that will kind of go away into the background. But it's really performing through it, pushing through it, not sustainable.
That's literally what you did for years and years and years of your life, and you don't have to do it anymore.
It's a pattern I'm still working on unlearning.
Yeah.
And knowing when have I hit that line is murky.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to scan your body right now,
yeah.
What are you feeling now?
I'm still feeling like some tension and anxiety like in my like chest right here, but most of it is dissipating as I'm settling back into. We also said this in the break, but it's just it's hard to let go of control when that was your main coping mechanism through life,
was performance.
Yeah.
And this is why it makes sense that all came up. And I want to let you know and the listeners know that at any point we can stop.
Yeah.
That this podcast is good enough. Mm-hmm. And not in the like good enough, but like is great.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you coming on and telling your story, and I know that you can handle telling your story.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for using my keywords.
Well, the way in which
is absolutely. So what became present for you? What version of yourself, what version of your pain came to the surface, 10 minutes ago?
I feel like I get very nervous around embarrassing myself or embarrassing people in my life. My authentic self is crazy. No, I'm just kidding. No, my authentic self is like, I'll say the thing that is a little taboo. I'll say things like, and it's kind of something that gets made fun of a lot when autistic characters are in TV shows. Like, they just say what's on their mind, literally, unfiltered.
It's what Xavier and I love about you.
And it's the part of me that I'm still learning to love. Truly. I was in a family therapy session with my parents a few weeks back, and it still shocks me to hear people love these parts of myself. And so I'm still working on internalizing that love and not feeling embarrassment. But they said, my therapist had them say, what they love about me the most. And they were like, we love how much we've learned about the world and how we look at the world in a different lens, because you teach us and you challenge us to look at it that way. And I was like, oh, that's not a part of me you hate, 'cause that's a part of me that I censor. And so when this inner it's even more than an inner critic, because I have so many inner critics that they all have to have different names. So this censor that comes up in my brain is like, don't say that. That's so hella embarrassing. You're being cringe, like secondhand embarrassment, or don't embarrass this other person. Like, this is your podcast. And I was just literally, the part of myself was coming up and was like censoring it, of like, who might listen to this podcast? What might they think? What might I think when I'm listening to this podcast? And when that voice just gets so loud, that inner part of me that just doesn't want to be too much for other people and doesn't want to embarrass other people and doesn't want to be a problem for other people. Yeah, that's what comes up.
Thank you for sharing that. How do you put next to each other? When you put next to the parents who took you to the therapist and the psychiatrist for the first time because you were too much, right next to the parents now saying, we love how much you challenge us. How do you feel about those things next to each other?
I think I feel still conflicted of just like, what is truth? What can I trust? What can I regulate myself into and expand myself into being more of me? And so it's kind of takes trial and error with multiple times with friends, and just have this reassurance of like, no, yes, we want more of that. More of that, please. And that's kind of how I am continuing to live into this, mental health journey, life journey of living into my authentic self. I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have multiple times in my life where the same thing keeps coming up and I get reassurance, and then I kind of expand a little bit more and a little bit more.
Yeah, having those safe people say, we like that.
Yeah.
We like it.
Safe people is correct. There's a lot of people who left my life in order for me to become this version of myself, who just couldn't continue on for whatever reason. And the people that have stuck around, this goes back to the values part we were talking about earlier. Centering in on these values, my core value, I would say, is community care. And like I have these other values like curiosity and creativity and liberation that are all connected to that. But community care is an aspect of that. And so what I want to bring into the world, community care, I also need to have in my life, community care. So having people like you and my husband who's back there and my puppy and my parents, like the people that have stuck around in my life, they have nurtured that soil that has allowed me to become this authentic self that I'm still exploring on becoming.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, we want more of you.
Yes.
And it is sad that certain people can't handle. I don't even know. Like,
Yeah, I think we trigger people. I mean,
yeah.
Right? Like,
I certainly do not, but
yeah, not in your profession.
Definitely not.
Not in your profession,
Definitely.
But liberation is a very like triggering thing. Like it's a pattern that if I could go about my life going, ooh, that's a pattern, hey, this is a pattern, like that's how my brain works.
Yeah.
And I'll see it all the time where people are like, how dare you ask for that? How dare you? I didn't have that. Why should you have that?
Yeah.
And I think that is still a voice in my head that after having, taking a break these past 4 years, if that isn't the experience my internal brain has been going through, is how dare you get to take a break from capitalism?
Alyssa,
bitch.
Alyssa, can we talk about you taking a break for the past 4 years?
Yeah.
That's literally the words that you just said.
I know. And let me tell you, it has been the hardest thing I've ever done.
I was like, taking a break? It does not sound like you took a break.
I know, but that's what my brain says. It's like, you didn't work. And how we have financially made that happen. Lots of some privilege and lots of luck, honestly.
Yeah.
But I have so much shame about it because I see so many of my friends struggling financially and struggling in other ways, and I'm like, why do I deserve this? And so the way I see myself is like, I've been on vacation the past 4 years. Like if not to rant on boomers, but like some boomers, I'm seriously, are like, well, that must be lucky. You just get to sleep in every day and you get to take naps and you get to do whatever you want and engage in hobbies. And I'm like, trust me, it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
The hardest thing I've ever done in my life is do this.
Is slow down. I mean, from a very young age, having to prove your worth through performance,
Through
and
action.
then like taking a quote unquote a break
Mm-hmm.
and slowing down your life pace and doing a lot of therapy
Yeah.
and reconnecting with your inner child. This is the hard work.
Truly. And I don't think everybody has to do that in order to get better, right?
Yeah.
But for my story and the amount of like complex layers that all went into it, like I wouldn't have been able to go to all the doctor's appointments I've had to go to. I literally last year in the first 4 months went to 26 doctor's appointments.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of doctor's appointments.
I was pregnant and I didn't even go to that many.
I know. Because that was another diagnosis I got was fibromyalgia. Like when you have the chronic pain, the mental health, all these different things.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about like just extending my stay here. Like you think, oh, it'll only take me 4 months to get better. It'll only take me a year. And it's taken me 4. But every single one of that has been so essential, so necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not been linear. I've had bouts of being so well that then, you know, something else comes up to be resolved and I'm not well anymore.
Yeah. I'm noticing the theme of overcoming and resilience. I know you showed us your tattoo, resilience, but I am noticing that you're here today.
I am here too.
Telling your story. Yeah. And I think when sometimes people tell their stories, they feel like they have to have like a bow on it.
Yeah.
Is like, I have arrived at some level of perfection and this is why I get to tell my story, is because I have overcome.
Yeah, that's your reward for reaching the finish line of mental wellness.
Yeah. And I think sometimes what's missing then is that vulnerability piece. Because when I'm in the middle of something, what I want to sometimes do is hide and go figure it out. And then I can come back and present it to the world. And I think what even taking a break on this podcast did was showed me we're still in the middle of your story. It reminded me we're still in the middle of your story.
Yeah.
Your story isn't done. And we don't have to put a nice bow on it.
Yeah.
There are some cool bows that we can put on it to talk about transforming your pain and what you've done with that. But I just want to acknowledge that even without some of the things you're doing to give back to the world, that's okay. You deserve to tell your story.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. That I think one of the markers of healing is being able to transform our pain and then what? Right? What do we do then after we have worked on ourselves? And I'm just wondering for you, what's coming up for you right now as I'm talking?
So, couple things, directions. One is like what I know now that I didn't know back then about healing and mental wellness back when I was starting this break was just how much of the healing that would come from like finding my community. That was a huge part of it. And so I really isolate. You said something about isolation.
Yeah.
And like, let me go isolate myself, figure this out, and then I can come back and have this nice little bow on it.
Yeah.
And because a lot of my trauma was connected to relational trauma around friendships, around communities, and feeling like I can't be myself, like I have to censor myself everywhere I go, I really, once the pandemic happened, became very isolated. And I had just moved. And even though I moved back to my hometown, I didn't know too many people still that I wanted to still know.
Yeah.
You know, here, like I knew you, and that was about it. So I had to find new friends, and that I had to kind of like refresh those skill sets a little bit. But that was a huge part of my mental wellness. Like, I think it doesn't get talked about enough that like just going to therapy and psychiatry and getting medicine and these diagnoses, like that's the beginning. And the parts that come after that, and the parts that come because you're in therapy. My therapist was the one who was like, you need to go find a queer community. You need to go find your people. And finding those people has helped me find myself and find my authenticity. And it's given me that permission, that liberation of, oh, I can do that. I can do that because that person's doing that. And that leads me to the other thought I had, which is going forward. I really always, when I was in school deciding my major, was conflicted because I was like, I would love to be a therapist, but I don't want to give up on this dream of being in theater. So I pursued that. And it was very rare that theater majors like double majored in something outside of the arts. And at least in the school that I went to, it was like looked down upon, like you weren't a real theater kid if you weren't putting all your eggs in that basket.
Yeah.
And so I just decided not to double major. And I had mentioned this to my therapist this last year. I was like, I really regret not getting a double major in social work. And they were like, okay, why don't you do that now? And I was like, I can't do that. I'm too old.
I'm too old.
And of course, I realized the ridiculousness as I was saying that, right? But it's that story that I had in my head. And when I met this therapist that I'm working with now, who's trans, who's autistic, I was like, wow, I think a lot of the traits that I kind of feel like are cringe, like this censor part of me or whatever. This person that notices patterns, takes lots of notes, is really nerdy, likes talking to people about stories. Like I actually, maybe that's like what I actually want to do. So that is something that I'm pursuing now. I'm taking my time with it. I was even going to start school this year and I was like, nope, you need some more time. You need to extend your stay a little bit. But that's something I'm really looking forward to. And kind of can envision my life past a year now.
Wow.
Which is also a part of that mental health journey. Like having a lot of trauma, I never really envisioned myself getting older. And I didn't know what it would look like. I just didn't know. It was very foggy, very hazy. And now I can actually see myself being a therapist, and that's something I'm wanting to pursue.
Yeah. I think many people can relate to that when they're in the middle of that healing journey. What does it look past the next therapy session? What does it look past the next few months? What does it look past the next few years? What happens when I am healing myself? And what would you say to somebody who's in that state of mind? Like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
I think I would just say kind of back to what you were saying of you don't have to know right away in order for it to one day emerge, and to just not have like hope that it will, because after 20 years of being in therapy myself, and it took 20 years to find all that. I'm not saying it's going to take that long for everybody, but like it happens when it happens. And it wasn't through pursuing excellence or pursuing proving myself or trying to push through or performing. All those ways I was trying to find my purpose and my what's next were not helping me. They were just pushing me further and further away from finding it. It was learning to love myself, be compassionate, slow down, connect with people on a real authentic level. That's where I found myself. That's where I found that what's next. The way that society tells us we find it is through externalizing it, but really like slowing the pace down of your life, making it sustainable, finding tools. That's what's helped me to just allow it to emerge and show itself to me. I didn't have to go find it. It kind of just found me. And I also think it was something that I think deep down I just needed time to give myself permission to say that that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
With my life. And it doesn't have to be a career. It could also be like a move that you're wanting to make. Whatever you envision for your life, though, a lot of times it's something that you've dreamed about for a long time and you just don't think you're worthy of.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful when I look at your story. It's through going to the depths, the scariest, most painful parts of yourself that beauty emerged.
And this is something that I have been talking about a lot recently with my friends, and it's a bit of advice that my husband gave me. One of the meltdowns I've been having a lot recently is just about feeling shame of not doing better than the generations before me. And so I had, and before we ended the pod today, I was like, make sure you tell this story. So living with my parents, not having a job the past 4 years, and being given all the privileges I was given as a kid to go to really, really good schools. I was saying to my husband the other night, I feel like I'm squandering away my life. And like, I'm just I'm not doing better for myself, and I should be this and I should be that. And it's really hard for me actually to be around extended family members and to be around people who are older than me, because I do a lot of comparison. And I find that a lot of the talk is surrounded around capitalistic things, and I just don't resonate with it. It's like, we talk about our jobs, we talk about our money, and we talk about what we do with our jobs and our money, and then that's it. And so I really kind of close off and get really anxious in those spaces. And that's when this all came up. And he looked at me and he said, Liz, what if doing better for you is not about capitalism? What if doing better for you is you are one of the first person in my family line to actually go inward and take the time to go to therapy, to take care of yourself, to find wellness, and to learn to have compassion and an identity outside of your job and all these things. Like, what if that is doing better?
He's a smart man.
He is a smart man. I married him for a reason.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful that you get to define what better is. And I know that you are doing the work, knowing that the next step is going to emerge.
It will.
We can trust that through you doing the hard work, the next step emerges.
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah. Any final thoughts? I don't really have a good way to end this because we're literally doing this for the, I was going to say the first time, but I mean, this is the third time that I haven't been able to end this. For anyone listening and is listening to your story and maybe relating to parts of your story and maybe not relating to parts of your story, but just here for the journey, can you give us a message of hope? I truly believe that's what we need a little bit more of right now in the world.
The message of hope and just like direction that I would hope more people do in their life is whatever you love doing as a kid, do that and do more of that. Like, even if you could only carve out 30 minutes, 20 minutes a week, do that. For me, it's painting, or it is playing card games and board games with my family. The occasional fart joke will come up,
I love it.
But be a goober. Be a goober.
Be a goober. Hey, we started the podcast with "I love you because you're a goober,"
and now we
wow.
There's the bow.
There
we knew
it
was gonna
is.
we were gonna find it.
We didn't need it, but
Landing.
it's nice. We landed. Join us next time for another episode of At Home, or one of our regular episodes of Counselor Off the Clock. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, give us a follow, give us a like, give us a subscribe. You can find us at TikTok and Instagram at Counselor Off the Clock. I keep not saying this, but you can also find us on YouTube. You can find the whole episode on YouTube. Maybe I should have said that in the beginning, but that's okay. You can find every episode on YouTube. I'm your host, Lydia Thompson, and we are off the clock.